Hello, this is Mike Carley at the University of South Carolina Bassoon Studio, and I am going to demonstrate the second stage of making a reed blank. So, the first stage, we essentially formed the reed, and now we've let it dry, ideally for a couple weeks. I'm going to remove the cotton thread that we wrapped it with. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is actually take the reed totally apart. So I'll twist that. And take the first wire off. All right, and now we have the reed that has been dried for long enough so it will kind of hold its shape. Just like furniture, if you have ever seen anyone making furniture, you clamp and brace the wood in different ways and cure it, let it dry until it no longer wants to rebound back to its original shape. So the next stage is beveling. I have a little wood block that I put some paper on here on either side, some sandpaper. I think this is like 320 grit sandpaper. You can also just cut a little square of sandpaper and use the table. But beveling is a significant part of reed making, and I'll describe why it's important in a second, but let me demonstrate how to do it first. So you want to make sure to bevel so that it's perfectly horizontal. You don't want to tilt it this way at all or this way at all. You want to just bevel perfectly flat. And I'm going to count to like 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. And you're going to want to bevel so that essentially we're creating flattened edges there. I'll do the other side as well. I'm only beveling up, excuse me, about 10 inches or so from the butt to where I stop the bevel. So it's just a little bit beyond where the third wire will ultimately be. And again, I'm making sure not to put any pressure so that it's a little tilted that way or that way, just keeping it as flat as I can. Okay. And now I'm going to see how this reed comes together. And if we bevel properly, what we can do is squeeze here, and you'll see the reed open up just a little bit in the center because there's a fulcrum point that happens like a seesaw, like the central part of a seesaw, that creates some forces that prop the tip open a little bit, which is one of the reasons why we bevel. Let me do this a little more. Okay. Now, I don't know if you can see that, but the reed is essentially coming apart a little bit there at the midway point, right at the collar. Okay, and you can see how the back looks. You don't want to have an extreme curve or anything, just a place where we do need to apply a little pressure to close it at the back so that we get that fulcrum effect. Okay, so that looks good to go. I'm going to take some cotton thread. This is what I had used to form initially. And I'm just going to kind of make sure this is centered and wrap it gently around the collar area. This just helps hold the reed in place while I start putting on the wires. I've cut 3 lengths of wire here, and I'm going to put the wires on starting with the third wire. So put this back on the mandrel that it was formed on. Okay, so third wire goes on in the same way that I demonstrated putting the wires on when we first formed this. And in this case now, I'm just going to put it right at the mark on the mandrel. Earlier, when it was first formed, it went past that mark. Now I'm going to put it on that mark. So, right goes under left. Keep it flush. And right next to the other part of the wire, turn it over. Again, right under left. Clockwise twist. If you go left under right, you just need to do a counterclockwise twist. And I'll tighten this third wire. So you can see now I'm starting the process of tightening, and because of the bevel, there's a little bit of an opening here. And my goal is going to be to make sure that that opening is totally closed so we don't have any leaks. So now I can look and I can kind of maneuver this wire around to the point that looks the best, that will close off the base of the tube. That should be around, if you've done the bevel properly, it should ideally end up to be about that the wire is essentially 5 to 6 millimeters from the butt. This measurement is not crucial, but I like to have the wire about the top of the third wire about 6 millimeters from the butt of the reed. Okay, and that looks like that'll close that down. So I'm pulling and then twisting and just kind of keeping it snug as I twist. And notice that I've gotten the twist all the way down, but it's not closed, and that's typical. So now I'm going to squeeze here around the butt, try to get that to come together. And try to get the wire a little better on here. Okay. And now to make sure that it is sealed, I'm going to start slowly moving this, inching this reed up the mandrel tip. Because of course, the mandrel tip gets a little narrower as it goes up. So the further up we push this on the mandrel, the more we can close down this wire. And we just need to keep doing this until the butt until there's no space in there and everything is totally sealed. I'm putting a fair amount of pressure on as I twist this. I want my third wire to be quite tight. And that looks pretty good. So now we see that it looks like it's going to seal, and it's perfectly round back in there. This is a really important stage to fix. If you do this well, you're going to avoid having problems with things leaking and with things not being perfectly round in the back there. Okay, so I'll take this helping thread off. And we see again, because of that bevel and because this third wire is on, there's a little bit of space there. It's just helping prop the tip open. What this does is enable the tip to be a little springier. Ultimately, the response of the reed is better without having to take so much cane off. So if you do this bevel properly, it can really help your reed. Okay, the longer the bevel, some people bevel up a little higher. It narrows the tube more and favors the high register. The shorter the bevel, we favor the low register. Put the second wire on. I'm gonna guesstimate where this goes at this point. It's gonna be 18 millimeters to the top of the second wire from the butt. And I'm gonna make sure that the twist is gonna go on the opposite side of the third wire. So, bring this together, rough it out. Now I can measure to make sure it's at 18 millimeters from the butt. It needs to be a little higher. The important variable here is the distance between the first and second wires. So I like to have 8 millimeters from the center of one wire to the center of another, or the top of each wire. In a very general sense, the longer that distance is, the darker the reed, and the shorter that distance is, the brighter the reed. 8 millimeters is a fairly substantive difference between the first and second wire. Okay, so this is centered, it's ready to tighten down. I'm going to make this really nice and snug, but I'm not going to pull quite as hard as I did for the third wire. I'm going to get that twist all the way down. Okay. Make sure it's in the center. There we go. And we really want to make sure everything by now should be sealing all along there. Okay. The first wire is the last one to go on. And this goes back where we first formed the reed at 1 inch to the middle of the wire, or 26 millimeters to the top of the wire. Same thing. Okay. So I'm going to just double check that. This is a significant measurement. Make sure it's high enough. I'm using inches here in this case, but you could certainly use millimeters as long as you know what part of the wire you're measuring to. So this should be 26 to the top of that first wire. Okay. Now I'm just going to tighten this down, and I'm certainly not pulling with a lot of pressure, just enough to keep it snug as I do the twist. We do not want to over tighten the first wire. It just should be snug, but it shouldn't be pinching the cane in. Okay. Straighten that out. And there we have it. The next stage will be wrapping, putting the wrapping on the reed.